Welcome to Redtastic. Story 1. I, 26 male, and my wife, 28 female, are currently living in a 3-bedroom house with our 2 golden retrievers. We've been married for almost 2 years now, and both of us are quite thriving with the jobs that we have right now. We bought a 3-bedroom house because we are planning to have a family in the future. And we got a high discount from a friend who sold the house to us. We are using the first room as our very own room as a couple. The second room was a combination of a workroom and the rooms where our 2 lovely golden retrievers sleep. We have had these dogs since the start of our relationship, and we treat them as our own children. That's why we made sure they can live comfortably as much as possible. We were living a peaceful life until my brother-in-law, 18 male, got accepted to a university near our residence. My father-in-law persuaded my wife to let her brother stay with us so that they wouldn't have to rent an apartment. I was strongly against this idea because I personally saw how unruly my brother-in-law was during family gatherings. My wife was easily persuaded by his own father, and since we were only using 2 of our 3 rooms, we gave the 3rd room to my brother-in-law. My wife told me that this will be a chance for my brother-in-law to prove himself to the family and for them to get closer, since they were a bit distant to each other due to their age gap. At the start, we were doing okay, and my brother-in-law was almost always not in the house because of his academics. Everything went south when my brother-in-law started his 2nd semester because he had fewer units this time, and he was always in the house. His true colors were starting to show, and it is very evident that he doesn't like that we had dogs in our house. I once saw him lock our dogs outside of our house, and when I confronted him about it, he reasoned out that he forgot that the dogs were still outside of the house. He also started to rely on us for almost 3/4 of his food, which really irritated me because our grocery budget almost doubled. Almost a month passed and my wife and I celebrated a 1-week anniversary celebration outside the country. It was the first time we had left the dogs for a long time, and we really made sure that my brother-in-law would take care of them. We went back to our house and surprisingly it was so quiet. I felt a shiver in my spine because the silence is not something we were used to inside the house because of our dogs. I rushed towards their room and they were not there. I checked every corner of the house, but there were no signs of my dogs and my brother-in-law. We started contacting my brother-in-law, and he just kept saying that when he left the house, he saw the dogs playing in our living room. We even tried to call the police because we really don't know how we can find our dogs. We started to knock on our neighbors' doors to ask around and find even little leads on where our dogs could have wandered off. One neighbor informed us that he saw 2 golden retrievers walking around our street 4 days ago, but he didn't think of it that much because he thought that someone owned them. I was so worried because if they were roaming around 4 days ago, they might have been lost since then and they could have been dead by now due to lack of food. With the help of the police, we were able to track our 2 golden retrievers 3 miles from our house. Luckily, a kind family took them inside and fed them for 4 days. We were so thankful to them, but at the same time, we were mad at my brother-in-law because he keeps denying that he lost our dogs. My wife started pressuring my brother-in-law about it, and he eventually confessed and told us that he wants the dogs gone and to turn their room into his own man cave. I was so furious that his reason was so dumb to sacrifice my dogs just like that. I told him to pack his things and I forcefully evicted him in our own home. We gave him a roof on top of his head, and this is how he repaid us. So am I the a-hole for evicting him out of my house? Update. 2 weeks have passed and my father-in-law was so mad that we kicked my brother-in-law over something so simple. We tried to talk to my brother-in-law about it, but he didn't even try to apologize. We were open to giving him a second chance, but he didn't even try to talk to us. My wife is now thinking about cutting off her side of the family because of the incident and how they even sided with her brother even though it was clearly his fault. Thank you. You're not the a-hole, OP. Your brother-in-law is, however, a big a-hole. He stayed in your home rent-free, ate most of your groceries. I'm certain he didn't do a lot of chores to make up for his laziness. And yet he couldn't put up with your dogs. Your home isn't his home. And if he didn't like staying in a house with 2 dogs, then he should have gone back home instead of leaving your dogs out for days and hoping they die. Your father-in-law is also an a-hole for not seeing that his son is being a jerk. Even if he sincerely apologizes, don't take him into your house anymore. You, your wife, and your dogs deserve some peace. Story 2. So my wife and I went to a summer beach party and took our 6-year-old daughter with us. 6-year-old is a strong swimmer and knows not to get into the water without alerting us. So although we were watching her, we weren't hovering over her. She was making a drip castle by the edge of the water. I was playing football with some guys a fair distance from the group, so we didn't hit anyone with the ball. My wife was hanging out with the family. All of a sudden we hear screaming. I run to the water and see my brother-in-law pulling my nephew, a 2-year-old boy, from the water. He was gasping and crying. He had wandered into the water and been knocked over by a wave. Sister-in-law started screaming at my daughter, saying that she had told her to watch him and calling her a selfish brat and a spoiled little witch and other things. I got so mad. I told my sister-in-law that my daughter is 6 and not old enough to be responsible for a child. I said she was a worthless piece of crap for not minding her kid. My wife had to grab our daughter and then drag me off because I was hopping mad. Some think I was right, but others are saying it's ridiculous to expect a woman who almost lost a child to be rational, and I overreacted. Should I have been more understanding? Nephew is alright, by the way. He didn't inhale any water or need to go to the hospital. Not the a-hole OP. Sister-in-law is one though. Almost losing her child doesn't justify her berating your daughter like that. I really hope your kid doesn't remember those words. Sister-in-law is an adult. Why wasn't she watching her own child? Why was a 2-year-old allowed to go near the water without supervision? Bad parenting and blaming another child for something that wasn't her responsibility. I would say you are very justified in your reaction. Now for some comments. Not the a-hole. Your sister-in-law needs to apologize to your daughter. Personally, I would refuse to attend any family gatherings until she does. This would be a hill I personally would die on. A 6-year-old is not old enough to look after anyone else. Not the a-hole. Ultimately, she put a 6-year-old in charge of her 2-year-old. Whether or not she was expected to be rational after he was in a dangerous situation, she is the one who endangered her child. And then she took it out on your child, who was probably terrified at all the screaming and things with your nephew. However she was feeling, I would have felt the same way in your position. How dare she attack your 6-year-old so viciously? With actual insults right then about that. I am on your side here completely. I would have torn her a new one. This reminds me of me when I was 9 and my brother was 3 and very, very hyperactive. He ran out from the street where we were unloading groceries from our car and into the road. He was hit by a speeding car and went flying, landing face down as if he were dead. My mother screamed at me and said it was my fault before sending me to a nearby neighbor's house. I spent the whole night panicking that he died. He was fine in the end, but I'll never forget that. I was with a friend recently who berated her 8-year-old son for not watching his toddler brother when he fell down the stairs. It brought back such horrible memories. Story 3. My mother has cared for and loved this dog for the last 7 years of his life, paid for his food, vet care. She and a boyfriend have grown attached to this dog. He is a member of their family. 7 years ago, the dog's original owner lived with us temporarily, then went to jail for 5 years. The dog started living with my mom after running away from OG's house multiple times from across town. Now, 7 years later, OG is out, has their own place, a newborn baby, and is wanting the dog back. Their partner brought this up to me a week or so ago. The conversation began with them venting to me about OG and some personal issues. How they want to get a fake service dog certificate so they can have a new dog in their apartment. I ended it by saying I would speak with my mom about it, but not to get their hopes up because my mom loves this dog. I didn't ask my mom, mistake on my part, because she was upset at the mention of it in the past, but has always said they can come visit the dog anytime. This past weekend, they went to visit the dog and told my mom they were just picking him up for a weekend sleepover. She didn't say goodbye, expecting to see her dog again on Sunday as she was told. OG starts texting, guilt-tripping my mom, sending pictures of the dog with their kids, saying it will be hard to give him back. Obviously, they had been planning this for a while. Hence our conversation the week before. And yet still did this to my mom despite what I said, knowing they didn't plan to give him back if they had gotten him for a sleepover. My mom is trying to be okay with her decision but cried on the phone with me and told me she cried all night when she found out they weren't giving him back. She felt like she had to say yes since technically the dog was his in the first place many years ago. I told my mom about how they didn't even know if they were allowed to have a dog there. The conversation with OG partner the week before. OG doesn't have money to properly care for the dog, plus it has food allergies. Hotspots that need to be taken care of. What if he accidentally hurts one of the babies? The dog has never lived with children before, let alone a newborn. What if he tries to run back to my mom's house but can't find it because he's 2 hours away? Plus he's picked up, euthanized due to being a male unfixed dog of a breed society heavily looks down upon. My mom plus her boyfriend are moving to the country with a pond, tons of land. This was where this dog was going to spend his golden years. It's wrong to move a dog into an apartment after 7 years of living in a great home with a yard. Ripping him away from that is so wrong in my opinion. I think they're being selfish and not thinking of the best interest of this dog. At the end of the day, my mom isn't going to make them to give the dog back. I'm just upset at how this played out. I suppose it could work out. The dog could love the kids, his new home, and that would be great. They tricked my mom and took advantage of her kindness. Am I the a-hole for being hurt over how they went about doing this? Now for some comments. Not the a-hole, but maybe even easier than court. Call their landlord and tell them the dog is not a service dog. If the dog really is only allowed if he is a service dog, OG will have to get rid of him again. I think after 7 years it would be considered her property. She can take this to small claims court if she's in America. She should have been wise enough to not be tricked into giving them the dog, but she should fight on getting it back, not the a-hole. Even if you had a close relationship with OG for several years, OG just set it on fire by tricking your mom and taking the dog away from her, knowing she would be heartbroken about it. The dog will not be happy in OG's care if OG cannot afford to properly care for the dog. And if he has already escaped OG's house multiple times in the past, the dog will not be as happy in an apartment not having proper exercise versus being in the country.